Yaxel Lendeberg may be out the door, but make no mistake, Dusty May's team will be fully reloaded for next season.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Schade. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to get started.
A lot of money.
Yes, right? We got a lot to cover today. We got the NCAA's new proposal that they're talking about next week with the D1 Council to potentially limit student-athlete eligibility or at least restrict it. We're going to talk about how we feel about this proposal, what it looks like. We'll get to that to close out the show. We also going to talk about some big-name players who entered the transfer portal on Wednesday, including five-star Nik Khamenia. We got Wright going again after 2 years at different Big 12 schools. We got PJ Haggerty, one of the nation's leading scorers, back in the portal as well. But we are leading off the show talking about the national champs, the Michigan Wolverines, who look, I mean, Isaac, it's always good to win. We know that. Never a bad time when you bring in a national championship. But in an era where, money talks. We know that. It's not a secret that Michigan also has a lot of money and can spend a lot of money on their roster. But boy, oh boy, does it feel like players are flocking to this program in Ann Arbor to try to play for Dusty May next season.
To the victor goes the portal spoils, Andy.
Yes,
I think
well
is what we're seeing here. Yeah, I don't know why, Andy. I've never really thought about this before, but it's like, yeah, you win this national championship, and suddenly everyone's like, I like the big house. Ann Arbor's great this time of year. I mean, but legitimately, Andy, I think it makes a ton of sense because it's one of the most prolifically known schools in Division I. It is a great football program. It's one of the biggest universities in the country. Dusty May is, I know he's, kind of youngish, but he's so well respected, has now taken 2 different schools to the Final Four. So there's a lot going for Michigan. It's a Big Ten school. The Big Ten has all the money, because the numbers are, Big Ten is more than the SEC right now. Yeah. And so this is not unexpected. And I mean, if you want to paint this is hard for us as Michigan side of it. It's like they're going to have to wade through a mountain of names and be very choosy about who they want, who they don't want. They're going to have to get quick feedback from players that still have eligibility. Would they, because this is always the thing, who matters? Does Michigan try to kind of usher anyone out? Or, there's just, to the victor goes the portal spoils, but it also brings with it a whole other world of difficulty that they're going to have to reckon with.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think part of it for me too with Michigan is just like they have this really talented core of players that we're expecting to stick around. But like you said, they kind of got to sift through that rather quickly and figure it out. But also what they were able to do this past year that I think is a really critical part of this conversation. And you and I mentioned it kind of briefly in the post-game aftermath on that show, but they did this with the starting lineup of all transfers. And, 4 of them were new that year to the program. And the other one was Namari Burnett, who'd been there for 3 years, but had initially started his career at Alabama. But Dusty May proved not only that he can win a championship at Michigan, which obviously is part of the reason you have these players interested in going there, but he also proved you can win a championship with a group of transfers. And I think that matters a lot. And I think obviously, we're talking about 18, 20, 22-year-old kids. A lot of them are going to chase the money and they're going to go to a school that won a championship. And they're maybe not thinking too deeply about it. But I do think to some extent, hey, if I want to win a championship, and I know that the most recent champion coach not only did it, but he did it with a team full of transfers. I think that matters more than if Duke had won. Or if Arizona had won. Those programs both have transfers, obviously, but Duke's starting lineup was virtually transfer free. In fact, I think it might have been transfer free. Arizona's Jaden Bradley, but he'd been there for 3 years at that point. Toby Awaka, Anthony Delor. So they had transfers on that roster, but it was a lot of freshmen as well. So like, I think that's a big part of this too, of why we're seeing some of these names. And we will talk about these names. We're not going to leave people in the dark for too much longer here. But like, they're connected to some of the biggest players that are currently in the transfer portal. And it sure feels like this is a situation where they're going to be able to replace the guys that they know are leaving. And if they don't lose too many other guys, which I don't think they're this is going to be a darn good team again next year.
So, Andy, let's talk about some of those. Let's start with the names, because that's what everybody's here for. The guys that are already there, that's not fun to talk about. We want to talk about the hot new thing on the block. And, Andy, basically it's Kansas's front court is where because apparently both Flory Bidunga and Bryson Tiller have at least some level of interest in Michigan, and maybe it's like first one to commit wins or something like that. But obviously they both should and do have multiple other places they could land, both Flory Bidunga and Bryson Tiller. Andy, Juke Harris actually met with Michigan on Wednesday. And so while maybe the Kansas of it all is a little more well-known, Juke Harris would be massive, both in terms of what it would mean and positionally massive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, talking about the players that are not going to be around, we know, Lendeberg's out of eligibility. Gale and Burnett are out of eligibility. Will Shedder's out of eligibility. Aday Mara would be insanely stupid to come back to school after what he did in the NCAA tournament. What I'm very curious about
where is he, Andy? Sorry to interrupt you. Is he like lottery mid first?
Yeah, I think he's going to go in the lottery. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes top 10. And this is a really good draft. But I don't see how an NBA team could look at him and be, like Donovan Klingen's playing great for my Trailblazers right now. Mara's not quite the same player, obviously, but like these big dudes who can move a little bit are really valuable. I think he's going to go top 15. And with the injury risk of being that big and coming off such a great year, I think it would be a mistake for him to come back to school, even though I'm sure Michigan would throw a hefty bag of change at him.
No Ceilings latest has him at 9 to
the that feels about right.
I didn't realize he was trending that high.
He wasn't. Like a few weeks ago, he was more in the 20 range. Wow. I think it's smart to be like, hey, maybe the 7'3" guy who moves better than almost any 7'3" guy we've ever seen, who has good footwork around the rim and is a great passer. Maybe that's a guy that NBA teams might want on their roster. I think the Morez Johnson of it all is interesting to me because he feels like a guy who's more in that 20 to 30 range right now. And obviously draft stuff changes all the time, but those are guys that are coming back to school. In fact, Yaxel Lendeberg came back to school for being kind of in that range. And obviously it worked out quite well for him. His draft stock has not decreased, and he won himself a championship. So if I'm Dusty May, I'm saying, hey, Morez, we played you at the 3 last year. You've showed NBA scouts you can do that. Now we're going to play you at the 4. You're going to get the ball more. You're going to score more. Obviously it depends if they say, hey, we want to keep you, Morez, and then they bring in Aiden Sherrill and Flory Bidunga, and suddenly his role is different. Like, that's not great. And that's part of the challenge that you mentioned of like, you kind of need quick answers from these guys because you got a whole laundry list of dudes who want to play for you. And if you're replacing Yaxel, you're replacing Burnett and Gale, but you got to kind of know if you're needing to make other moves or not. I expect Cadeau to be back. It's possible he's not, but like, you'd like to know that so you know if you need to find a point guard or not.
And you've got LJ Kaysen coming off injury, right? Like, what kind of role does that play? Yeah, I just looked a little further down at No Ceilings mock draft, and they've got Morez at 14 right now.
Oh, wow. He should go if he's going to go in the lottery.
Yeah, if he's going to be even back end lottery like that, dude, I don't know that next year's draft class I think is going to be a bit weaker, but if you can go 14 in this draft, my goodness, that's something wild, Andy. Out of these guys, I know it's super early, so it's wild to make predictions about it, but out of what we know of a Flory Bidunga, a Bryson Tiller, and Aiden Sherrill from Alabama this year, Juke Harris, who had some crazy moments at Wake this year, who out of this group seems I'm not going to say most likely to go to Michigan. I'm going to ask it this way. The most like Dusty May fit out of that group.
Yeah. I think it's Bidunga. And like, I look at Bidunga's list, which this was reported by Jeff Goodman, that Goodman was clarified, like, as of now, this is his list. So it could change, but it would be Duke, St. John's, Louisville, and Michigan. And like Bidunga fits at Duke, like he fits there very well with the style he plays. He fits really well at St. John's as a Zubi Ejiofor replacement and also former Kansas Jayhawk. And he fits great in Michigan. Frankly, I think it's kind of an odd fit at Louisville in terms of what Pat Kelsey typically likes to do. But I mean, you got to go for him if you're Pat Kelsey. Like you figure out a way to adjust your offense around him a little bit if you bring him in. But
those others in the portal.
Yeah, because Fru's in the portal for sure. Yeah, I think for Bidunga, like Michigan, I mean, look what they did with Danny Wolf, what they did with Aday Mara, look what they did with Morez and Yaxel and like and Vlad Golden before that, which Dusty had at FAU. Like they have massive amounts of success with their bigs and they play them so well. Like obviously it's hard to turn down Duke and Patino and St. John. Like there's a really good list of schools for him, but like I don't think
if there is a school
that
that trumps that. Right now, it's Michigan for bigs. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think there's a better place to go for a two-way big, which Bidunga absolutely is, than Michigan. And I mean, it depends what he wants. If money is a huge part of it, again, Michigan has it. They might be able to pay the most amount for him, but like maybe Texas Tech and their oil money spends more money or something like that. But I don't think you could go to a better place that would fit your skills for Bidunga than Michigan. And I'm curious, reportedly he's visiting Louisville this weekend with Jackson Shellstad of Oregon, which is a fun 1-2 punch. But yeah, I don't find Louisville as compelling of a fit for Bidunga as I do Michigan. And I'm curious if he will see it that way. The other guys on this list, like Tiller, yes, I think for some of the same reasons, he's just not quite there yet. Juke Harris, he's a really, really good player. And you bring him in if you can, especially because you're losing Burnett and Gale. But I'm like a little less certain about that fit because this team, we're expecting Cadeau to come back. We're expecting Trey McKinney to come back. We're expecting LJ Kaysen to come back. And also a storyline that we didn't talk about yet, but really kind of lines up with the whole Michigan is really good and they're able to get players because of it. Brandon McCoy, the 14th ranked player in the 2026 class, committed to Michigan during their Final Four game. Like while they were beating the crap out of Arizona, Brandon McCoy was like, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna go there. Like
all right.
Not even like committed during the game, which is hilarious. And like McCoy's a 6'5" wing. So like you have a lot of depth. And if you're gonna play Morez at the 3, if there's any chance he's coming back and you're playing him at the 3, you don't have clear room for Juke Harris. And I think you'd rather spend your money on a big and maybe a backup point guard or a third string point guard with Kaysen, but Juke Harris is a really good player. I don't know that this is the perfect fit for him. Aiden Sherrill, really good player. Also not sure it's the perfect fit. He's just not exactly the type of big that Dusty May has typically had, but I'm sure he'd find a way to make it work with him.
Yeah, and I also don't – India, I haven't looked much – they got that 7'3" kid from Spain, Marcus Moeller.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked into him much. Like, is he going to play a role, be a factor? And Andy, just quickly, and I know we got to move on. I was texting earlier on Wednesday with a mid-major assistant coach of a team who had a whole lot of success this year.
Yeah.
And he too was saying, just in the same vein as what we're talking about with Michigan and all the attention they're getting in the portal, his direct text to me as we talked about this was, we were talking about scheduling a time to chat. And he said, hey, let's do early next week. Portal and recruit visits galore here the next 4 or 5 days. And I said, I'm guessing your on-court success is changing portal stuff. And he says back, for sure, our profile is a whole lot different than it was 2 years ago. And so, Andy, you went on the court, you're going to see recruiting success, both high school and portal stuff. So that's something to keep an eye on. Andy, Wednesday brought we already had a ton of high level names in the portal, but boy, were there more of them Wednesday. We're going to get to this crop, including one of the best scorers in the country. More on that in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, the NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I really like about it. You can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, matchups right there all in one place. And during the playoffs, it's that extra insight that really matters. So it just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. FanDuel already has national championship odds for next season, 2027. Michigan and Duke are tied at plus 750, followed by Arizona plus 1200, Florida at plus 1300, and Houston and Sparty round out that top 5 at plus 1500. Head on over to FanDuel.com right now today to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Thanks for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. Go to the link down in the show notes, lockedoncollegebasketball.supercast.com, or click the link in the show notes to learn more and join the community. Andy, it was another day with a whole bunch of big names. Yet again, they're still rolling in. Literally, we just added Colin Chandler's name from Kentucky as we started rolling here. But we had PJ Haggerty from K-State jumping in. We had Rob Wright from BYU. Hey, more to say on that in a minute. Nik Khamenia from Duke. You had just talked about how Duke doesn't really lose people to the portal. And here we go yet again with a much higher profile Duke player getting out. Jalen Petty from Texas Tech. I can't say it and not laugh. James Najee from Baylor. Tomorrow we're going to see Charles Bediako. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe.
Jizzle James from Cincinnati, Masama Diop from Arizona State, and Paul McNeil from NC State. Andy, we're seeing a whole bunch of the Wolfpack leave after Will Wade kind of left them in the lurch. So, Andy, as you look at this, same kind of question I asked you on yesterday's show. Who out of this group is the most shocking for you?
I'm surprised at Nik Khamenia. I will also say I haven't fully processed Colin Chandler because we literally found out about it a few minutes ago. That's a little bit less surprising. He just played such a big role and seemed like such a Mark Pope guy, but he's from Utah. I wonder if BYU has come calling. It feels to me like a likely, like, hey, Saunders is gone, Rob Wright is gone. And so like, we're going to see if we can get this Chandler kid to come back. But that one did surprise me a little bit. Jalen Petty also surprised me. Such a good player as a freshman for Texas Tech, a good fit in their system. I don't know why Tech wouldn't have been able to pony up as much as anybody else would in that situation. But I think Rob Wright Khamenia. We'll talk about Rob Wright in a second. But like Khamenia picked Duke over Gonzaga and UCLA. He was also Arizona and North Carolina was in the mix for a while as well. And it was kind of a surprise when he picked Duke. And he was sort of looking like maybe a one and done, but then he didn't play a huge role. They brought in Dame Sarr and obviously the Boozers and he played 20 minutes a game. He played 38 games. Like he was a very clear and obvious part of their rotation. And I just assumed he was poised for a bigger role. Like it seemed very obvious with, Dame Sarr is showing up on mock drafts and maybe he will stay and maybe that's part of the equation here. Who knows? But obviously, Cam Boozer is gone and most people expect Isaiah Evans to be gone. And it just felt like Khamenia was going to step into a bigger role at Duke. And if you didn't want a bigger role at Duke, why did you go to Duke in the first place? Like, I don't understand. Who knows? Obviously, as we talked about on Wednesday's show, like, sometimes these are conversations that are happening that aren't necessarily the players choosing to leave. It would be since we're talking about this being a surprise, it would be a surprise if Khamenia wanted to leave Duke and left them kind of surprised. It would also be a surprise if John Shire said, hey, we're going to recruit over you basically. And we think it's best for you to leave. It's possible that happened, but Khamenia was 61% on twos. He shot 34% from three. His advanced metrics defensively were good. Like, I don't know what else he could have done if that wasn't, good enough. So he was one that surprised me, certainly.
Yeah. And because Duke right now has the best recruiting class in the nation at 247, but it's Darren Rippey, who's a point guard. It's Maxime Meyer from IMG Academy, who's a center. It's Bryson Howard. His son, a 6'4" small forward. So Khamenia has the size on him, and Cam Williams, who's a 6'11" power forward. So it's not like, yes, they have a great class coming in, but it's not like he has any positional competition from that group.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an odd decision. One thing that I wanted to say on it too, and I'm going to speak entirely from the Gonzaga lens here, that stands out to me is like you get it. Like I said this on an episode of Locked On Zags, like the old mantra, like if you don't succeed, try again, is like incredibly true when talking about recruiting, because Gonzaga missed on Zoom Diallo 2 years ago. He's at UW for 2 years. Now he's in the portal. Last year, they missed on Isaiah Harwell, who went to Houston. They missed on Nik Khamenia, who went to Duke. They missed on Jalen Harrelson, who went to Notre Dame. They missed on Efiosa Oliogu, who went to Butler. Every single one of those players is in the transfer portal. They missed on Nicholas Avdalas, who is now in the transfer portal. 3 years ago, they missed on Jackson Shellstad. And this is obviously not exclusive to Gonzaga. This is true of every single program of you don't have to even get the guy the first time. If you get the guy the first time, you might only get them for a year. And Gonzaga might swoop in and get Harwell for 3 years. That's a real possibility. And so it's interesting to me of we're now in this era where missing on a recruit is not a permanent thing. You kind of just, and I obviously bring that up because of Khamenia in particular, where I think UCLA is going to be right back in the mix. So is Gonzaga. So is Arizona. Maybe, obviously new coach at Carolina, but maybe they get back in the mix too. I would be shocked to see somebody go from Duke to UNC, but stranger things have happened. You never know.
It happened in baseball last year, making wins. So we'll see if it's happened in basketball with NC State and North Carolina twice now. With Carolina players going to state. But this is always an interesting thing. You can't burn bridges, whether you're the player or the coach. Right. You got to maintain contact. This is all part of this context. Andy, I want to talk about Rob Wright. Last year, one of the big storylines, and I had completely missed this until you said it one time, or maybe it was Cam Stewart, the host of Locked on Baylor, but it was literally Baylor has no players from the previous year, all gone. Right. And that happened in part because Rob Wright kind of out of nowhere shockingly left when they were completely anticipating him to come back and depending on him to come back. And that's part of why when you look at Baylor not being as good as they should have been this year, it's because Rob Wright kind of screwed him, Andy, if we're being honest. Yeah. Well, Andy, Rob Wright sat in front of his locker after their NCAA tournament season-ending loss to Texas, and he was asked at the end of a line of questioning, "Hey, Rob, what does the future look like for you?" And he said, he kind of, what the future looks like for me. And then he says, obviously, if I'm in a college jersey, I'll be attending BYU for sure. And Andy, what's hilarious to me about that is not only the fact that Rob Wright's now in the portal, completely negating that statement, but it's not that he just said, if I'm in a college jersey, I'll be attending BYU. It's that he bookended it with certainty. Yeah. Obviously, if I'm in a college jersey, I'll be attending BYU for sure. Just all of that is hilarious. And a reminder that we would hope and want that we can trust the things players say. And I don't even want to call Rob Wright a liar here. I just think sometimes there are things said in the heat of a battle and the moment that you don't even really mean. You're just kind of caught up in it, right? Yeah. And maybe he was being intentionally duplicitous. I don't know. But I just take it all with a grain of salt in this day and age.
He's a kid. Honestly, that's and I don't want to infantilize him or anything, but he's a kid. I do not think he intentionally lied. That would be a really bizarre and frankly unnecessary behavior. Why would you, if he thought he was going to leave? My guess is he hadn't thought about it, because when you're in the thick of the season, you're not thinking about your future. And there have been rumblings that Rob Wright's representation, which includes his father, were kind of pretty aggressively trying to shop him around to get some more money this next year. And that's kind of a dirty secret in the game that is happening. And it's certainly not just him. And that's just I don't know the extent of the validity of that, but it's very, very possible that Rob Wright was caught off guard by that question, because he is a sophomore who had not been thinking about it and answered the way that kind of placated the reporters of sorts, of just answered and said what people wanted to hear. And then that's not the truth. And that's where you need some media coaching. If you're not sure, if there's any chance, you can't say for sure. You can't tack that on. And again, I don't think this makes him a villain. I'm sure BYU fans may disagree, and that's fine. College basketball, you're gonna have some villains, but it was an unfortunate situation. It's unfortunate that he said it, obviously, and it's unfortunate that he's now entering the portal for looking for his third school after kind of blindsiding the two previous programs. That's just not a great look for him and potentially his representation here. But hopefully it's a learning curve for him, and hopefully BYU can maybe go get their guy Colin Chandler and start picking up the pieces.
That'd be nice. They got the coin to go get a bunch of people. We know that. Andy, you think PJ Haggerty's going back to Memphis?
Yeah.
There's so many statements I'm making on the show lately that I say tongue in cheek that I just can't even make it through seriously. I apologize.
If I hadn't finished my statement and was going to lead into the next thing, I was literally going to say, so Isaac, do you think PJ Haggerty's going back to Memphis? No, I have no idea where he's going to go, though. He's such a unique player because he is very obviously talented. I mean, he's averaged over 21 points a game 3 years in a row at 3 different schools. That is absurd. To do it in the American Conference twice in a row, to do it at the Big 12 level is just ridiculous. But he's a little like he doesn't fit a lot of programs. Like there's a lot of teams out there that do not want a PJ Haggerty, not because he is bad, not because of his attitude. I mean, I don't know, but like just because he's a shot chucker and it's not a fit at a lot of places. So I'm really interested what the next year of eligibility for PJ Haggerty will look like and where he'll end up, because I'm not sure I see a lot of obvious fits, but somebody's going to give him a big bag of money to score 20 points for them, and he's probably going to deliver.
All right, Andy, it's another day, a bunch of big names. We'll see who hops in on Thursday. I know we're playing, just spoiler alert, we're planning to talk Kentucky. Going to be a fun day, but there's going to be some more names, Andy. You can almost guarantee it.
Well, and what we want to talk about here to close out the show is some potential changes that might be coming down the pipeline, which won't necessarily change the volume in the transfer portal necessarily, but will certainly help with some of the confusion around eligibility rules that have plagued college basketball and the endless numbers of lawsuits that we have been seeing against the NCAA. We're going to talk about this proposed rule change, what the timeline is for it to change, what it might look like, and our thoughts on it, all coming up here in just a second.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. UCLA made history by winning its first NCAA Women's Basketball National Championship, dominating South Carolina 79-51. The Bruins controlled the game from start to finish with elite defense and balanced scoring, finishing the season 37-1. Star center Lauren Betts was named Most Outstanding Player, leading a team effort that capped a 31-game winning streak. Under head coach Corey Close, UCLA secured a landmark title that has been decades in the making. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes. I'm coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
All right, Isaac, we talked transfer portal, we talked Michigan, and now we're going to take a look at potential changes that we might be seeing in college athletics. I was going to say college basketball, but this does go across multiple sports here. The NCAA committee is exploring a new standard for student-athlete eligibility. Effectively, as we've said, there have been so many lawsuits, and really the most aggravating thing that we have seen as of late in specifically college basketball, but it permeates other sports as well, is just a lack of clarity. Like inconsistency in terms of when the NCAA is putting waivers on certain situations, when they're putting their foot down, lawsuits not always being consistent, obviously some concern about like where those lawsuits are filed. Like it's just been an absolute mess for the last couple of years, really, since we had that rule that changed your 2-time transfers in the middle of the season. That was when like the chaos really just completely unfolded. And so per Ross Dellinger of Yahoo, we're having this meeting. The D1 cabinet is going to meet and review a proposal next week. And Isaac, we're basically, it's pretty cut and dry. 5 years, starting either the day you graduate high school or your 19th birthday, whichever comes first, you get 5 years. There's no waivers. There's no redshirts. There are no exceptions. Well, okay, there are a few exemptions. There is maternity leave, religious missions, and military service. But other than those proposed exemptions, you get 5 years, and that is it. If you break your leg and then tear your Achilles the next year, tough. Like there is no, and I'm speaking on Steel Venters here because he's been on my brain, but like there's no lack of clarity around this specific rules. And so that's kind of what we're looking at, Isaac, and it feels like a welcome change, even if it's maybe not perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, Andy, is I know there was the executive order from President Trump recently that had something like this amongst multiple things to try to help.
Yeah.
I forget the word, like save collegiate athletics or whatever he called it. And I know that specific thing doesn't really have any jurisdiction or authority. And, you know, as you and I were talking about before we started recording, it sounds like this thing was already in the works and it's not coming out of that. But the fact that we're getting multiple things like this starting to happen, Andy, at the first thing that it hits for me is I'm just glad that something is happening, right?
Right.
We've been continuing to lay all the issues at the feet of the NCAA, who refused to get out ahead of regulation around the portal, who refused to get out ahead of regulation around NIL and eligibility and other things. And so for me, it is specifically a bed of their own making that they're now lying in and asking other people to come make a new bed. You know what? The analogy probably falls apart very quickly there, but you know what I mean? It's just like, stop, you know what? You wouldn't have to be asking people to bail you out if you hadn't screwed this all up in the first place. And, but let's put that aside and just say, I'll take any sort of baby steps. And so if we can start to get some sort of regulation and clarity around eligibility to just start moving in the right direction, that's a win. Because I'd like to eventually get to, okay, let's do stuff with contracts. And I'd personally love to get back to one-time transfer, things like that. This is a step in the right direction is kind of where I start with my response to this.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think for me, a big part of it is where the lawsuits come into play is the allocation of waivers. Like we said, the NCAA's inconsistency in how they apply waivers is what has triggered so many of the lawsuits. And to be clear, while there's plenty of criticism about the seemingly arbitrary decisions by the NCAA, considering the many, many thousands of waivers that they get every single year, like there's no way for there to be uniformity. Like it's just not possible. And so you're going to be able to have lawyers who parse through and say, hey, you know, this situation 3 years ago at Texas Tech means that you shouldn't have ruled this way in our situation this year, you know, whatever. Like, and it just becomes really, really messy. And then once people started realizing that the courts are going to generally disagree with the NCAA, they started, you know, going that way. But if you say no waiver requests, you just say 5 years from this date, there's no ambiguity whatsoever. You know, you graduated high school on this day in 2026, you now have until this day in 2031. That is it. You get your chance to play within that window. If that window goes away, you're done. And like I mentioned Steel Venters earlier, or maybe Ty and Grant Foster is a better example because he was a bit more well-known, but like those guys played 6-7 years of college basketball, but had legitimate reasons within the scope of the current NCAA rules for why they should still be eligible. So the NCAA saying to Grant Foster, like, hey, no, you're done. We don't think you should be eligible. And him saying, well, no, look, like per this rule about junior college players from Diego Pavia, that shouldn't count against me. Per your ruling on COVID, that shouldn't count against me. These 2 years I didn't play, that shouldn't count against me. And the NCAA was kind of hamstrung and they kept trying to fight it and they lost because they don't really have a legal standing. If you say you have 5 years and after that there's no waivers, you don't even get to apply for a waiver. There's no red shirts. You don't get to say, hey, he sat out this year, so he gets next year. This problem goes away. Like it still may be unfair. And you may look at a situation where a kid, you know, could have come back, you know, or missed 2 years because of an injury. And you're like, that's really sad for him. But in a world where there's no waivers or red shirts, there's no conflict there. Like it's just done. And to me, that does feel better. I think it is unfair for those kids, but I think that a reality where there is a hard and fast rule, even though it may disadvantage some, is better than a reality where they're just arbitrarily applying those rules and you don't know. Like it's always going to be unfortunate if a player misses 2 years because of injury. But I think that the not knowing whether you're going to get that eligibility back is worse than a reality where it's just, hey, sorry, you hit your 5 years, you're done.
Yeah. Andy, I really do like, I appreciate what you're saying there, the concrete nature of this, because what I always like when I'm in a leadership role, I always like when I have a rule or a principle or like a underlying thing to fall back on to say, well, I'm going to apply this rule here because of this. So for example, one of the things I do at the college I work at is I put together teams of musicians. And one of our rules is similar to student athletes, where they have to have a 2.5 cumulative GPA. And if they're struggling with that, it puts me in an awkward conversation or a position if a kid's like, well, I got a 2.3. Shouldn't you make an exception? No, because the rule is 2.5. Are you at a 2.5? You're not. Sorry, you can't do it. And so I just think that applies here, where again, I'm a person that wants justice for everybody, and so I'd love a world of rainbows and roses where you missed 3 of your years because but I think, Andy, all things equal, this is probably the most fair and even-handed way to dole it all out. And so I could get behind that ultimately.
Because you'd know. Like, I think that's such a, like, right now there's the lack of knowing whether you're going to get that extra year or not. Like, and again, if we're talking about fairness, like, yes, it is probably unfair in some way that in this situation, Tyon Grant Foster wouldn't have gotten to play because he had a heart attack and missed 2 years. Like, that's a very unfortunate, and that would be sad. But also, like, you could make the argument, and people absolutely have and will continue to make the argument, that being a 26-year-old competing in high school or in college athletics is also unfair. I don't think it's quite the same. And that was an argument I made a lot when talking about this, but I get it. Like, it's not an argument that I just dismiss. I understand where that argument comes from of, like, we should not have 27-year-olds and 26-year-olds playing college athletics, with very few exceptions like missions or military service or things like that. So I'm okay with that. Like, if this were to go into effect as soon as this year, and just kind of, I don't know if you'd grandfather situations in, that's a whole other can of worms that we can deal with another time. But I think eventually having a rule that is, for lack of a better word, ironclad like this one is beneficial for college athletics.
As a man, I feel sort of discriminated against, though, Andy, because you just read the exceptions and there was maternity leave.
Yep.
But if I sire a youngling, then I'm not going to get any paternity leave out of it. No, I'm just kidding. That all seems to make sense. And I do think, even though it's ironclad, we just, by the nature of life, there are a few of those things that I think it makes sense to grant exceptions to. I'll just say this: the NCAA and their lawyers are going to have very ironclad, tested language to make sure that even though it's a very few exceptions, people are going to try to find a way to worm their way through it. And so we'll watch out for that, Andy. So we'll hear more on this as the committee meets and makes decisions about this and proposals about this. And then we'll see if that can get into other and bigger things about transfers and other things like that. All right. As we said, Andy and I are going to be back tomorrow. Our plan right now is to lead with Kentucky and a bunch of the guys they've been losing, and then go to NC State after that. But of course, if there's crazy things that drop, we'll get to that as well. Can't wait to be back with you. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On College Basketball on video and audio, do it right now so you don't miss a second of the show. As we've been saying, we're with you all off season long. We're getting our way too early top 25s ready. We're planning to roll those out on Monday. Can't wait to share it and allow you to just rip them to shreds as you tell us how dumb we are. That'll be part of it. If you've not checked out the Every Dare Club or the Locked On College Basketball Discord, those links are down in the show notes. Go there and find it. As always, apologies to the Lawyer family and the Sanford family. Cheers to the Wild Popes. Shouts to the McBruins. And until tomorrow, peace.